Well, good morning, everybody. Let's call this meeting to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
If I can have members note that you're present on your tablet. Chair, we have a quorum with 13 members present and 2 members absent.
Thank you very much, Clerk. Well, let's begin with non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anyone who would like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of MTS. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
We do. Peggy J. Carlton. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here to speak with you because MTS has some very serious problems. The first thing I want to talk about, and I'm requesting the removal of the CEO, Sharon Cooney, the removal of the COO, Mike Wygant. And can you hear me now? And the customer service supervisor, Sonia, who always takes the sides of the drivers, no matter what they do. Recently, I started talking to Mike over a year ago, expressing to him that I'm tired of these drivers abusing me because I'm disabled. Not only me, but they do others too. But I'm sick of it. Is every time I get on the bus, there's a problem with them and my scooter. When I got this scooter, MTS sent for me to make sure that it was in compliance with your buses, and it is. The 24th of August, South 43rd and National Avenue, the bus driver, it was Route 955, bus 2220, she put the ramp down for me to get on the bus, but she didn't get out of her seat. And when I parked my scooter, then she got out of her seat. Then I realized why she did not get out of her seat. So she struggled to hook the back of the scooter up. And then when she came to the front, she couldn't do it because she couldn't get down on one knee to do it. And then she struggled and struggled. Then she said to me, "You have to get off of this bus and wait for the next one because I can't hook your scooter." I said, "Nope, you need to call somebody to help you." So in doing that, she got belligerent. She incited a riot on the bus. The people were bullying me, screaming at me, telling me to get off the bus because I was holding them hostage. So at that point, I called MTS security and I asked them if, not knowing that she had already called them, and I asked them to monitor me because I feared for my safety.
Ma'am, if you could just give us one concluding sentence, your time has expired.
I'm done. I can't talk anymore.
That's correct. If you could just close it out with one sentence.
Well, thank you for listening. I hope you heard what I was saying. I want you to feel my pain. I really do. This is not the end of this. It's not the last time you're going to hear about it either. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a pretty day. How do I get out of here?
Next is Justin Kerr. Justin, please make your way to the podium. Justin, if you can make your way to the podium.
Good morning. My name is Justin, and I am a student at UCSD. And several months ago, I was moved off campus because my on-campus housing period contract expired. Since then, I have been continuing to go surfing by bringing my surfboard on the trolley in order to help refresh myself during the summer and try to prepare for their rather rigorous program to begin again in the fall. as surfing is one of only a couple outlets I have available to serve this purpose. I do not own a vehicle. I've been encountering transit officers occasionally during these times who have been concluding that I am permitted to travel with the surfboard. But on August 1st, I encountered an officer whose name I do not feel it's appropriate to mention here today, who surprised me by boarding the trolley one stop before I was to leave the trolley that day. Seeing my surfboard, he immediately told me that I can't bring it on the trolley anymore. Because this completely surprised me, I quickly responded that I do it all the time. His response was, well, all the time isn't going to happen anymore. I'm telling you, if I see a surfboard on the trolley again, I'm writing a citation. Since I cannot risk being given a citation like this, I just quit surfing altogether since this happened. This, however, has put quite a crimp on my goal that I mentioned above, which I'm hoping people can agree is quite a valid one. I feel cherry-picked because when I encountered this officer, he appeared to target me and bypass the other passengers on that same trolley car who had bicycles with them. I asked the officer about the bicycles and he didn't respond. I do have photos with me today that I've also submitted online that show how I would secure my surfboard to the wall and out of the way each time I rode. This officer may not have seen this since he boarded.
Your time has expired.
I have since. I'm not trying to get anyone into trouble here. I just want to be permitted to continue surfing as I have found it to provide incomparable therapeutic value. Thank you so much for listening.
Next is Alex Wong. Alex, please unmute yourself now. Alex, it looks like you're still muted.
The Green Line needs at least 7.5-minute frequencies as soon as possible. The Green Line serves Mission Valley and Grantsville, two of San Diego's fastest growing, fastest densifying communities. Honest transit-oriented developments will make the Green Line a cash cow for MTS in terms of ridership. But to milk this cash cow, you need 7.5 minutes or better frequencies. The biggest obstacle to 7.5-minute Green Line frequencies is the plan to have the airport trolley share tracks with the existing Green and Blue lines between Hawthorne and Santa Fe Depot. This will create a bottleneck that will severely limit Green Line and airport trolley capacity, frequency, and reliability. Therefore, it is imperative that the airport trolley completely avoid sharing tracks with existing trolley services. We can do so by building the airport trolley underground. Doing so will allow MTS to maximize frequency, maximize speed, maximize reliability, and maximize ridership for both the Green Line and the airport trolley. Best of all, the additional speed and ridership will maximize farebox recovery.
Next is phone number ending in 3731. Please dial *6 to unmute yourself.
Hey guys, it's Truth. First, it's trolley story time. About a month ago, I heard a lady say that a trolley car disconnected and one trolley had to push another trolley out of the way. She said she ended up waiting over an hour in 96-degree summer heat for another trolley at Gillespie that never came. She had to call someone to come pick her up. I've heard somebody else say that getting on and getting off the trolley to get where one needs to go makes no sense. Another man missed his bus because of an extra transfer. What's the point? MTS, bad decision. Global, you said nobody needs to worry about that extra transfer for the future copper lines because it's one car, trolley doors will be left open for air conditioning. More proof that Global doesn't ride the trolley. All trolley doors are always open, but they're only open if the trolley's actually there. So if it's one of those 105-degree days in El Cajon or Santee, somebody will be waiting for that junk copper line when in 105-degree heat. By creating another useless transfer, all of you ensured less riders who don't have extra time for an extra transfer, according to MTS's own waste of money study. I also happened to see MTS contracted engineers checking out the copper line tracks in El Cajon. Guess what? They had to be subjected to the same realities that your writers are subjected to on a daily basis. A crazy guy who escaped from Alvarado yelling at them. If I post that picture on MTS's Y2K social media challenge, can I win a prize? Here's what's more important: preventing deaths at trolley stops. There's no reason a 52-year-old man should be stabbed or a 15-year-old should be killed by gunfire while waiting for a trolley. You guys know there's trolleys running at 2 a.m, and yet you had no security at Palomar Station to prevent that man from being stabbed. And I continue to be right about children being put in danger by riding without their parents. Last, I came up with an MTS game. Go to Imperial Beach and eat a slice of pizza every time you sing Empty 227 Goes Bus.
Your time has expired. That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. With that, let's move on to our consent items. Those are items 3 through 23. Clerk, is there any public comment on the consent items?
We do. Phone number ending in 3731. Please dial *6 to unmute yourself.
Item 6. So East County repeatedly gets thrown under the expensive electric bus, both by Sanag and MTS, but they're expected to accept a bunch of 396,000 charging systems thrown into their communities. No to that until East County has more transit service to justify being a sacrifice zone for this toxic infrastructure. Item 12, yes to more lighting everywhere. Every stop and station should have lighting like Park and Market does. Item 17, 361,000 partly for 2 elevators at UTC. That's amazing that Sandag's baby, the Blue Line, continues to get most of the funding and attention from MTS, while the Green Line stations with elevators remain neglected. I recently had a conversation with someone about how much of an embarrassing anti-ADA disaster the Grantville and SDSU elevators and escalators are. Priorities. Item 18, at the last Sandag Regional Planning Committee, I asked if the Lemon Grove Depot Trolley Plaza was done because it doesn't look like it. I also told them to actually go there and check out all the drug addicts in the plaza, especially at night. Item 19, Los Angeles-based Michelle Guerrero is gonna do some art for $615,000 at the East Street Station. I hope it's better than the murals at Grossmont because that artwork's really well done, but has zero meaning to trolley riders. What do fish circles and hypnotic spirals have to do with La Mesa? So I'm hoping there's a clear theme that says something about where somebody is. Michelle's art is interesting, so we'll see. Item 22, I'm going to make sure to speak against these conflict of interest codes at a future county meeting. Don't worry. Item 23, I strongly recommend not wasting over $829,000 to go down the equity black hole. It hasn't gone well at Sandag, and every city council where I've mentioned that nobody knows what equity even is, everybody in the chambers laughs because they know it's true. If you call DEI programs racist, you'll find agreement everywhere too. Hope none of you are caught in an echo chamber of lies within your government circles. Have a good day, everybody. See you around.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you very much, Clerk. Is there a motion to approve the consent items?
And I will second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Hall and a second by Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp to approve the consent items. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Chair, I just had a couple of comments, just real
Please.
quick. Apologies. I just want to thank staff for the following efforts. Item number 12, social equity listening tour, Orange Line related lighting improvements. It's a really big deal for constituents in southeastern San Diego and near East County side of the service area. Item number 18, Lemon Grove Depot rehabilitation, right near the Big Lemon. So that's going to be a big deal for folks. And then item 23, glad to see staff receive and implement the direction the board advised regarding comprehensive equity-related policy and reflecting that administratively. Just want to point those things out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp. Seeing no further discussion on the consent agenda, I'll ask the clerk to take the vote.
Members, please make your vote on the tablets. The motion passes with 13 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
Thank you very much, Clerk. That brings us to our discussion items, beginning with item 24, and that is Senate Bill 125, a funding update. And we're going to invite Mike Thompson to present this item.
Good morning. I'm Mike Thompson. I'm the Deputy CFO here at MTS, and I'm joined by Gordon Meyer, who is our Manager of Financial Planning. We're going to give you an update on Senate Bill 125. Just as a recap, this was approved by the legislature over a year ago, and then last fall, the board approved the first allocation package for Senate Bill 125 that programmed how we were going to spend $284 million of funding over 4 fiscal years. So this pink box on the slide shows the original funding plan, and this was in the legislation. It included 2 revenue streams, Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program, or TIRCP, and then Zero Emission Transit Capital Program, or ZETCP. You can see we were supposed to receive $136 million on April 30th in the spring. That was put on hold, and this whole pot of funding became part of the California budget development process. When that process concluded, they did produce a revised funding stream that changed, sort of shifted money out a little bit and delayed some of the funding we were supposed to receive. So the green box on the bottom, you can see what was approved in the California FY25 budget. The first year is somewhat similar, but you can see the second year basically is cut in half and pushed into the following year. And I will note, we still have not received any of this funding as of 8:30 this morning. We keep telling it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, but as of yet, we have not received any funding yet, even FY24's funding. But again, the amount hasn't changed. There's just some uncertainty on timing, and now it's part of the California budget development process. It's sort of a standalone thing that we thought it was going to be. So based on that, before I get there, this was what was in the original plan. Again, it's $284 million. We had 2 main program goals. It was to enhance services on security and bus and trolley, and we put in that services in right away for the most part. And then we also wanted to balance the current structural deficit through fiscal year 28. So that's how we built the last plan. Again, it was approved by the board last December. You can see we had $46 million going towards zero emission bus overhead charging infrastructure. That's the ZETCP funding. It needs to go towards something zero emission related. So we put it to our charging infrastructure projects. We also put another $26 million in FY25 CIP, the capital improvement program for the Orange Line modernization. So those are the 2 capital pieces of this pots of funding. All the rest was going to go into operations. It included $16 million for security enhancements that went into place last year. It included $39 million of trolley service enhancements, $54 million of bus service enhancements, $19 million towards Iris Rapids, which also went into service last year, and then $5 million towards Otay Mesa service improvements, and then another $4 million towards bus stop improvements. The last piece of it is we wanted to balance that structural deficits we have in place through fiscal year 28. So we're at that point in time, our forecast required about $75 million additional funding to balance the budgets through FY28. So that was that plan, again, $284 million. With the tremendous delays in this, and we still have not received that, and now that it's being part of the budget process, we sort of want to talk about revising our approach with this. We believe we should program this as each payment comes in. So we're really going to talk about this first payment of $136 million that we were supposed to have received already. And then this plan, this SB 125 allocation plan can be revised at any time by the board and the budget committee. So we can do this any points in time, multiple times. There's no limit on that. So it's very flexible. So we feel that we'll plan right now on this first payment. We'll put a preliminary plans in for the next 2 payments, but then also we'll bring it back to the board every year when we want to change the plan and when we actually receive that cash. Part of the process now will be having the board approve that next year's payment. So that's what we're done. We've sort of revised our proposed plan, and we're presenting it here today. So starting with TIRCP, we're supposed to receive $119 million, again, any day now. So we wanted to keep portions of the original plan in place, including the security enhancements, the Iris Rapid, and the Orange Line modernization that's already in the CIP. We also want to front load the structural deficit balancing to at least get us balanced through FY26 and into FY27. That gives us a little bit of security if this is the only payment that we receive. So that's the reason for moving that sort of forward. That does require us to delay some of our service enhancements. But we do want to put in the Blue Line Overnight Express, put that back into the budget. That was removed from the operating budget in the last year's budget development cycle when we sort of redid the budget the last minute to take all SB 125 out of the budget. That was one of the things that was sort of taken out of the budget. And then also trolley service enhancements, getting all of our service to 15 minutes. We took that out of the original FY25 proposed budget when we created our no SB 125 budget that was approved by the board in June. We want to put both of those two things back into the budget at probably with this, as soon as we receive the cash and as soon as this allocation plan is approved by the state, we can put it with and amend the budget at mid-year. So those are basically the two things we want to add back. And then we're using the rest of that $118 million, about $49 million towards structural deficit balancing, because we do have a significant structural deficit each fiscal year. Then when we receive the second payment, again, we'll bring it back to the Budget Development Committee and to the board, but based on what we know now, this is what we're proposing, is we would extend all services that we put into place in the original payment through fiscal year 28. So that's another year of security enhancements, another year of IS Rapid, another year of Blue Line Overnight Express, and also another year of trolley service enhancements, but also potentially adding the 7.5-minute service on the Blue Line to UTC that was in the original plan, keeping that in this payment. But we would hold back additional funding for structural deficits to get us through fiscal year 27, to have that security in place that we are balanced at least through fiscal year 27. Again, this is tentative as of right now. Once we receive this payment, we'll bring this back and revise the plan again and have the board approve that. So if we receive a third payment, again, it'd be $59 million. It would potentially come in 2 years. We would fund additional structural deficit balancing to help us get FY28 to be more manageable. And then at that point in time, we could do additional funding towards service on the bus side. So we put $22 million towards bus service enhancements that we could put into place for fiscal year 27. And then again, this is tentative. We'll bring this back again and as we receive these payments. When you roll all this up, again, it does shift additional funding towards structural deficit balancing, and it does take money out of service, particularly on the bus side, where we've delayed service a couple years versus the original plan. It does remove Otay Mesa and bus stop improvements. We can seek competitive funding sources for these projects, or we could use our regular CIP or our regular operating budget to potentially fund these projects as well. That can be discussed at the board during the budget development cycles. And lastly, again, plans for payments 2 and 3 are still tentative. We just need to put something in this overall allocation plan. That is what we're proposing today, but we will bring this back to the budget committee and the board in the future. So I want to take a quick minute to talk about the structural deficit. So you can see the 5-year forecast. This was presented to the board in June when we approved the fiscal year 25 operating budget. At that point in time, we were presenting the budget without any SB 125. So here we've added SB 125 back in based on the previous slides I just showed. And you can see for fiscal year 25, we had a $79 million structural deficit. So what that means, our recurring revenue streams are less than our recurring expense streams. And we've been operating this way since 2020, where those things do not match. But prior to 2020, recurring revenue, recurring expenses were always balanced in the budget. We've had stimulus funding, and then we'll have SB 125 to help us balance those things. But both of those things are one-time in nature. They're not recurring revenue streams. So we sort of show that below the line. We can see what, based on the service on the street, we do not have enough revenue today to pay for all of that. And you can see those deficits grow from $79 million to $95 million in fiscal year 29. So with this plan, we can get through all the way through fiscal year 27 and parts of the way through fiscal year 28, where we have a balanced budget. We can keep the same level of service on the street today. I'll move on to the ETCP. The original plan included $46 million. Again, it has to be spent on zero emission related items. So the current plan was we would receive 17.3 million initially and then about $10 million a year. And that has shifted around, but essentially we're still going to receive the first two payments in $17.3 million, but then the last two payments are sort of shifted out. So what we built in the original plan was just continuing to add infrastructure to our facilities. We already have 49, we already have 24, charging stations at South Bay. We need to add additional ones as we do an iterative process to build out our infrastructure. We would add some charging positions at Imperial Avenue, Kearny Mesa, and also at the East County Division. So that was in the original plan. And again, we should receive fiscal 24 and 25 at the same time. So what the 17.3 million that is currently in the FY25 CIP should be the same. Right now it's programmed towards Kearny Mesa, Imperial Avenue, and East County. So we're not proposing any changes to that. Future payments will change slightly just in the timing. We still think it'll go to the same projects, but the timing is going to change. So based on that, we'll move that down between projects as our timing for those projects has not changed, but the funding will change. We'll still go towards the same project we initially planned. But again, we'll bring that back to the board. It'll be part of the CIP process as well. You'll be able to see it there. And we can review it each time we do the CIP development. So I talked about the allocation package. It's the 40-page document that was attached to the agenda item. It was originally approved by the board and submitted to the state last December. It was approved by the state in February or March. Again, we were supposed to receive cash in April. As I said previously, this package can be updated as often as necessary, anytime that there's a need. It's very flexible that way. So we anticipate doing annual updates as this process gets done at the state budget process, what's in the new budget. When we get the cash in, we can bring it back to the board, make changes to the plan accordingly. So we have taken the same presentation to the budget committee last month. They had some recommendations. And we incorporated that, and we built the full allocation package as attached to your agenda item. Where that is here for approval today. And then once we do that, we will submit it to the state. And when we get their approval from the state, we can start incorporating this additional service in the fiscal year 25 amended operating budget. And with that, it brings me to the staff recommendation that the MTS Board of Directors approve the revised SB 125 allocation package.
Very good. Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. Alex Wong, please unmute yourself now.
I applaud MTS's decision to accelerate increasing late-night trolley frequencies to 15 minutes system-wide. This will allow low-income workers who currently drive to work at graveyard shifts to switch to transit. MTS should also increase mid-coast frequencies in June 2025. I am concerned that MTS may delay 7.5-minute frequencies on the mid-coast in order to balance deficits. I ask MTS to reconsider this decision. Increased frequency shortens travel times, alleviates overcrowding, and helps passengers feel safer. After all, in 2023, 84% of Trolley Part 1 crimes, as well as the majority of Trolley Part 2 crimes, happens at stations rather than on board trolleys. Increasing mid-coast frequencies to 7.5 minutes is an excellent investment. It only costs $3.7 million annually to do so, and the Blue Line has lower per-passenger subsidies than nearly every MTS bus route. And with Blue Line ridership growing by 11.4% in the past fiscal year alone, 7.5-minute mid-coast frequencies could not come sooner.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. Well, let's open board discussion on this item. We will begin with the chair of our Budget Development Committee, Director Moreno.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. The Budget Development Committee heard this item back in August, and we had a robust discussion on it. First and foremost, I want to thank staff on all their hard work on the 125, SB 125 funding, and also on being prepared for such funding to come down to San Diego. It is, I think we were, because of the equity listening tour, we were very ripe to receive the funding. And so kudos to that. I want to note that under the SB 125 revised funding package proposal, several projects and several services were fully recuperated to be fully funded to the original planned amount. These include the Orange Line modernization project, the security enhancements, and the IRIS rapid operations. Additionally, I'm happy to see that the Blue Line Overnight Express is also going to receive funding once we approve it. And it's expected to start next week. I'm sorry, next week. Next year, right? I wish next week. And so very happy about that. Those were big part of what our customers were telling us that they wanted. So I'm happy to see those. In the meeting, we also spoke about the revised version of the SB 125 funding proposal, not including the Otay Mesa service improvements and also the bus stop improvements. MTS staff did note that they will try to identify grants and other sources of funding. And I do trust that staff will be successful in identifying grants and other sources of funding, which is why I was okay with moving forward with staff's recommendation. But I do want to note for the record that we need to make sure that that part of the package comes to fruition if we don't identify grants and if we don't identify other sources of funding. One of the reasons I believe we were so successful in our 125 funding was because of our packet. The packet I know is something that is that we could modify. That was made very explicit. But one of the things that I think we need to think about is the fact that we told the community that this is how we were going to spend the 125 funding. We told the state of California this is what we were going to spend the 125 funding. And we owe it to the community and we owe it to the state of California to do what we said we were going to do. So I do want to note for the record that this is a promise that we made to our constituents, and you should hold me accountable, and we'll hold staff accountable on that front. And as the Budget Development Committee Chair, I recognize that we have a structural deficit, but nonetheless, that was something that that we promised. So I do want to note, and I do want to put on the record that that there was a promise made, and that we need to fulfill it. And so at the end of the day, I think my biggest, the thing that I want to focus on the most when I sit here as the MTS chair is our ridership. We want to build our ridership so that we're not in the situation that other transit agencies find themselves in the state of California. We obviously have been very successful. We do have a deficit. It does not look like other transit agencies in the state of California. They are looking very bad. So we've done a very good job, but we need to continue striving to be better and to do better. And so with that, I'm happy to move staff's recommendation on this item.
Thank you, Director Moreno. We have a motion to approve the item. I am happy to second it. Seeing no further discussion other than from Director Elo Rivera, please proceed.
Thank you. I appreciate the work on this. I just had one question. I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around the timing of this in relation to the budget each year. It's not insignificant amount of funding and money that we're making a decision about. Right now, I understand why it's the timing is what it is. Is the plan that in previous cycles this would come in advance of the development of the budget or alongside the development of the budget? I just want to make sure I understand.
So we have no idea.
Yeah.
The problem is that we still don't even have the first payment.
Right.
The good thing is that we know that at least one other agency has received their payment. So they got it wired to them. I believe it was 2 weeks ago. So I don't know what the thinking at the state level is. We've been trying to reach out to the treasurer's office to find out why it's been delayed. But so each year when the budget is proposed by the mayor, the governor in January, we're going to look to see, is the next payment in there? Is it programmed in the budget? And then in the May revise, is it still in the budget? And then finally, when the legislature takes up the budget and approves it in the summer, is it still in the budget? So that's where we're going to have to be very fluid in our budgeting based on what we find out from the state.
And if I could add, the payment we're supposed to receive is technically FY24's
Right.
state budget. So hopefully, once they get that ironed out, we'll have more clarity on when we're going to get FY25s, because we're in FY25 on the state side.
Right.
But that, hopefully, we'll have more clarity on that. Well, you know, at least with the governor's budget in January, which would work nicely for our budget cycles. But we have to play it by ear.
Well, I guess we'll do the best we can. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Director Elo Rivera. Any further discussion on the item? Seeing no further discussion, clerk, please take the vote.
Members, please make your vote on the tablets. The motion passes with 13 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
Thank you, clerk. Let's move to item 25. Item 25 is a fiscal year 2025 capital improvement program update, and Mike Thompson will stay with us and provide us with this presentation as well.
So as we finalized our operating budget last year, we talked about a number of budget structural deficit strategies to address those things, and some of them were related to the CIP. So there was a desire to sort of get an update on the CIP. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a quick update of what was in the FY25 CIP, then talk about those budget closing strategies. So, every year with our CIP, we do a 5-year look of what the overall project needs are. And that's what this table is to the right. The 5-year, we roll up into 6 categories: bus revenue vehicles, rail revenue vehicles, construction, facility and construction projects, rail infrastructure projects, and other equipment installations. And then we have the 6, those first 5 are all basically stated good repair related. It's keeping our current system up to standards. The last one is other initiatives. It's basically everything else that's not stated good repair related. There was $390 million. This is things like all of our zero emission bus initiatives. It includes the Clean Transit Advancement Campus, the desire to do that. It includes some transit center expansion and some future transit center expansion. So all those type of things are basically new initiatives. We think of it that way. It's not related to our existing system, and we put that in one category. And all these categories is $1.3 million need over the next 5 years. The majority of that is in the CID good repair bucket. It's almost over $900 million, 71%, and about almost half of that is revenue vehicles alone. For replacing our trolleys on time, replacing our buses on time, and including the transition to zero emission buses in that as well. So we have that 5-year unconstrained need, and then we basically fund 1 year at a time. We do look at the out years, and I'll talk about that later, out year revenues available, but we basically fund fiscal year 25 when we do this process. So in fiscal year 25, we funded $250 million. $195 million went towards state good repair projects, and then the other $55 million went towards other initiatives. And you can see for 26, 27, 29, we still have significant project needs. We have not funded those at this point in time. We've only funded that current fiscal year. And you could also see that while we did fund $250 million, a lot of that was being helped by the state Senate Bill 125 funding that we just talked about. We did have $69 million of stuff we could not fund that was asked for fiscal year 25. Most of that is for the Clean Transit Advancement Campus or Division 6. But there is other normal state repair projects that we could not fund last year as well. We also presented a 5-year summary when this CIP was approved by the board in the spring. Again, you can see $250 million was approved, $69 million not able to be funded. So we had a deficit just for fiscal year 25 of 78%. Over the 5 years, we have $900 million of just stated grid repair type projects, and we only have available revenues of $866 million. Now, what we consider available revenues are our recurring funding streams and also grants that have already been awarded. So we do have a $400 million deficit. That is our target to get additional discretional funding from either the state or from the federal government. That's what we know we have to go after to get fully funded. Otherwise, we have to delay projects each year. So we were only 65% funded with the original CIP that was approved back in the spring. Some of the highlights real quick of on additional details on here. So on fleet replacement, we have a total of $82 million. Most of that is on the bus side. We can see we do fund all of our bus replacement vehicles. Usually the first thing we fund is replacement vehicles. We funded $61 million towards buses and $21 million towards our light rail project. And then you can see the bus procurements as we go out, they do get more expensive as we're required to buy more and more zero emission buses, which are about 50% more expensive than a normal CNG bus. And then we're going to be done with our SD100 light rail project and funding it next year. And then in 2 years, we'll be done with the whole project. And then right when that gets done, we need to start funding the SD7 replacement project. Under facility and construction projects, this is basically 3 different subcategories. It includes all of our bus facilities, all of our rail facilities, and it also includes passenger facilities. We did have 21 projects submitted for fiscal year 25, and 3 were not able to be funded, but 18 were funded, with $21.9 million in total funding, including $9 million towards bus facilities and $10 million towards passenger facilities. Rail infrastructure, again, is 2 subcategories. It includes everything related to our track, and it also includes the electrification signaling around the track, which we call MOW. So there were 18 projects submitted for fiscal year 25. 14 were able to be funded. 4 were not able to be funded, had to be deferred. So it was about $69 million in total that we're able to fund. And this does include some of the funding from SB 125 in this category, the $26 million for the Orange Line improvement. We did include all the projects in attachment A that shows this funding and a brief description because there's a lot of projects underneath this. So you can see all that there. The next one is just other equipment installation projects. We have basically 2 subcategories here. It's basically the operations side, which includes service vehicles and maintenance and cleaning equipment. And then it's the admin side, which is primarily IT systems and IT infrastructure and IT software. So there were 22 projects submitted, requested for funding. We were able to fund 20, but 2 were not funded. $22.2 million was allocated toward this category for this current fiscal year. And those are all the stated good repair categories. And then we move on to our other initiatives. The biggest piece here is our ongoing compliance with the innovative clean transit infrastructure and our transition to zero emission buses. So here we have all of the overhead charging projects at each of our divisions. And you can see the picture on the right at the overhead charging infrastructure at South Bay that was completed. That was 24 stations, and there's over 200 buses there. So we need to do this 9 more times. So as we finish it here, we're going to do this same overhead thing at IED and at KMD, and then we're going to go back to South Bay and put more there. So it's an iterative process that we're funding over the next 10, 15 years. So we were able to fund a lot of money here from SB 125 as well. And then we also were not able to fund the Clean Transit Advancement Campaign or Division 6. We just did not have any extra funding to put towards that. So that the construction of that is a significant project that we're continuing to go after discretionary funding towards, but we're not able to fund it on our own without any extra funding from our state government partners. And then under our initiatives, there were 6 other projects submitted, and we're able to fund 3 of them. 12th and Imperial Transit Center downstairs, we're funding towards redoing that. And then the Green Line double track, we added some additional funding towards that project so we can complete it. And El Cajon, the 3rd track there, we needed a little bit additional funding to complete that project as well. And in the out years here, you can see other transit center type wants that we'd like to do. Again, no funding identified at this point in time. So going back to our operating budget, and we had significant structural deficits, $70 to $90 million over the next 5 years. And without SB 125, we have a serious problem next fiscal year. We would not be able to balance that because our stimulus funding will run out in the middle of next fiscal year. So we talked about different strategies, and there were a couple that were related to the capital improvement program. That included a one-time shift of $30 million of identifiable funding from the existing CIPs to operations. And then the next one is in sort of an ongoing structural shift of how we share money between CIP and operating budget. There is flexible dollars in the capital program that we could move to operations if there was a need to do so. And that's about $58 million. So I'll talk more about each of those. The one-time shift, again, we identified over $70 million of projects that just had flexible funding that had not been encumbered yet. It is type of funding that can be used for operations or capital. So we could, if we needed to, we thought we could shift $30 million on this and then just delay some of these projects. But you can see the projects on the right, all those projects need to be done. Bus procurements, platform construction, bus wash replacement. I mean, there's nothing there that is, not necessary. So it would just delay the completion of those projects. So this was not a recommendation, but if we did not have SB 125 funding and we were in an emergency, we would have this funding available. The next piece is sort of an ongoing theoretical discussion is we have always built our capital budget to preserve dollars in the capital budget. So when we get additional federal dollars, if we put additional federal dollars in the operating budget, we take flexible dollars and put it into the capital budget. We've always kept state transit assistant funding in the capital budget because 10 years, 15 years ago, we lost all of our state transit assistant funding and it was a huge problem because most of it was in the operating budget. So we keep that in capital where it's a little easier to react to funding losses than when the service on the street. So we've always had these ways we built the capital operating budget funding sharing. We could change that if we needed to. Obviously, it would delay capital projects. But we do have probably $38 million of Transportation Development Act funding in the capital program now that can be used for either one. And then we have about 20 million of state transit assistant that's in the capital on purpose. And then we could also use that in the operating budget. So there's about up to $58 million of truly flexible funding that can be in either bucket. Now, doing that does have a significant impact on the capital program. So we want to talk about that real quick. The total project need, that $1.3 billion, is not going to change by moving this funding around. You just have less funding for projects each year. So our stated good repair projects would not be able to complete it on time. We'd have to delay them. We couldn't replace buses on time. We might have to delay those, things like that. And then also our zero emission bus transition would have to change. So we need to get the infrastructure done so when we can start buying those buses, we can charge them efficiently. So all of that potentially would be delayed if we took all this money out of the capital program. And we could use competitive funding opportunities to offset some of this, but we're already chasing a big nugget for just to balance our regular CIP with our competitive opportunities. It just makes everything more challenging. So we took a look at the next 5 years, the next 4 years, just taking FY25 out of the picture right now. Over those 4 years, we still have $1 billion of projects, 733 million of which is stated good repair related. We had identified about $600 million of available fundings, but if we took $58 million a year out of those 4 years, or $200 million, we would only have $383 million available for CIP. So that 383 is basically half of what our stated repair need. It doesn't really even let us do any other initiatives. It makes it really challenging. We go from a 61% funding percentage over those 4 years to a 38% funding percentage. So it just creates significant challenges, leaves a significant gap, and makes even stated repair very challenging on the state side. So while it's something that could be done in an emergency, it's not something we're recommending there either. So last slide here is the recap. We're not proposing any changes to the fiscal 25 CIP that was approved. For future CIPs, as long as we have the SB 125 funding in place and we do have the deficits balanced for a few years, we probably wouldn't shift any of this money to from capital to operations at this point in time. But again, we can review that each budget development cycle with the budget committee and also with the board when we approve the CIPs and change that as the need may arise. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that update. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
All right. This is an informational item, so no motion is necessary. We'll begin board discussion with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. The only comment that I would have is, as we look at this capital program going forward, there's two kinds of capital investments. One which create future expenses in the operations, and one which is a capital replacement of an asset whose useful life is up. So, for instance, the zero emission bus ZEB, I'll just call it ZEB. If we transition to that, that does put perhaps higher expenses, energy expenses in future years. And that is one kind of capital expense to consider. What are we buying that's going to cost us more ongoing versus a replacement of an asset? And I guess that's the only comment that I have, is that we are aware of, when we do capital investment, are we creating a future expense that we're going to have to cover in a structural deficit environment versus a capital investment that is replacing something that's broken or worn out. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Director Moreno.
Okay, thank you. Once again, thank you to staff for bringing this forward. This was a request that I made as the budget chair so that the board could understand better our capital improvement projects budget. So number one, thank you. Also, just to piggyback on what not board member Goebel was saying, the ZEB plan is a really fungible plan right now. We don't have a concrete plan because of hydrogen potentially coming in and what the future is going to look like. I just wanted to make sure that I captured all the information you said. The $300 million that you brought up, that has nothing to do with state of good repair. Is that correct? For this year. I know that for future years, you very poignantly pointed out that it could be utilized for state of good repair. But for today, the $300 million, we have encumbered funding for state of good repair. That's the total of $900 million. That includes the 300. That does not include the 300.
Does not include.
I'm following you. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, this obviously state of good repair is number one priority when it comes to the capital improvement projects. But I do want to point out to the board that there is $300 million that are there that are not a part of the state of good repair and that are a part of our future plans of capital improvement projects, which are not, they're not set in stone is I guess what I wanted to say. I see Mike, we had a robust discussion on this as well. I think after the meeting that, you know, we have to be very flexible with our ZEB program. So thank you for bringing this forward. I thought it was very enlightening and it's good for us board members to chew on and decide how we want to move forward. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think to your point that it is a flexible program for zero emission bus transition, there is built into the state's rule that we could request a off-ramp, meaning that we wanted to kind of delay some of the purchase requirements in the rule because they do not want you cutting service in order to fund that program.
If I
Thank you. If I may add a few things. I'm not proposing we do anything at this moment. I just want to make sure that we as a body know what is in front of us, and budgets are very difficult. And when you start peeling the onions, you start seeing a lot of things that you didn't see before. So I just for, and not only the board, right, but also the public. I think transparency is very important, and I'm happy that you presented it in this way, so detailed. I do appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Seeing no further board discussion on this item, let's move to our next item. That's item number 26. That is a transit operations insourcing feasibility study project update. And we're going to get this presentation from Mike Wygant. Once you get settled in, please feel free to begin your presentation.
Good morning, Chair Whitmer, members of the board. To my left, I want to introduce a few people. I have Mike Daney. He's our Director of Contracted Operations and Passenger Facilities, and James Jergen from TMD, and also Russ Chisholm from TMD. So real quick, I'll give you a little bit of context before I turn it over to the powers to be. This agency is, I think most of you are well aware that about half of our service is contracted out and about half of it is internally operated. Just to give you a little context and some history, I'll go back I think it'll help the discussion. I won't go back too far back to 1880 to explain how MTS or transit in the region came, but I'll go back, and I think it's important to go back to about the 60s, 1966 through 69. The region, especially the inner city, had a few transit operators. The region consolidated those for the kind of the core service within the San Diego region. And from 1969 to 1985, that was actually run by the city of San Diego. And that really is kind of the basis or the core of the service that is internally operated, that is not contracted out. Obviously, it's expanded multiple times, but in 1985, the operation that was being done by the city was turned over to the relatively newly formed MTDB, which was formed through, I think, Senate Bill 802 back in 1976. Similarly, an action like that happened at North County Transit District. They were formed in 1976, and they had two small operators that were also formed, the city of Oceanside and the city of Escondido. At the same time, from 1985, when the city turned it over to what later became MTS to run that core operations, and it went through multiple expansions. Until 2002, there were a couple other operators in the southern region. There was the county transit system, there was Chula Vista, and there was National City. Geographically, they were a little bit out of our core area. Those were being run by those cities or the county, and they were being privately operated through contracted services. And they've had multiple different companies that have run that over the last 40 years. But just to give you kind of a context, that's how we ended up with directly operated service and contracted service. They were always contracted, and I couldn't tell you how long, but they're always been under collective bargaining agreements through those private operators that were contracted to those cities. So starting in 2002, those smaller agencies, those three, the county, the National City, and Chula Vista, divested and rolled under to MTDB or MTS, and that's how we became the operator of those, and they were running in those regions. And still today, that's basically the platform or the DNA and how those two separations happen. So, and then last year, the board directed staff to look to see what the possibility of bringing the contracted service back in-house, what those steps would look like, if it could be done, what the positive outcomes could be, what the challenges could be, and of course, what the fiscal considerations would be. So you may remember in July, staff came to the board for consideration a contract with TMD, which was approved for them to really kind of dive into that and look at that, all the analysis, and come back to the board at some point in time to really lay out what our options are and what that process would be. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Russ, and he's going to go through what the steps will be and what that process will be for your consideration at some point. Russ.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. What you see before you is the project team. We'll be working through Mike Daney at MTS. He's the Director of Contract Operations and Passenger Facilities. Both myself, Russ Chisholm, and James Gherkin are from TMD. We're the prime contractor on this. We brought in two other firms in the areas that we did not have sufficient expertise. Best and Krieger are a legal firm that specializes in transit funding, CBA type activities. So we have that expertise. And 49's their name. They're a technology-based firm that also specializes in transit technologies. So we feel we've got a very strong team that covers all of the subject areas. GMT is a national leader in transit planning, operations, and scheduling since 1988. We're headquartered here in the county, up in Carlsbad. We've actually got a 34-year history of working with MTDB and MTS, encompassing approximately 50 projects. So we have a long history of partnering together. Just 3 of major projects we worked on. We worked on the Elevate San Diego 2020 ballot measure that was sidetracked by COVID. 2017 TOP, the optimization plan, and then the original 2007 comprehensive operational analysis really restructured the bus and trolley system, mostly where it is today. We also work elsewhere. We work across the country. We've undertaken some 200 transit network redesigns elsewhere. You can see LA Metro, the next gen plan, which is currently being implemented. San Francisco's Muni Forward, again, also being implemented. New Jersey Transit's Next Bus. We continue to work in Orange County, in their plans, among many others. But also I'd like to add, we also have been working over the years in both insourcing and outsourcing. And just some of the firms we've worked, some of the cities we've worked with, City of Los Angeles, who contract out all of their service, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Denver, and New Orleans. So we bring quite a bit of experience about how the industry and other cities and regions approach this. In terms of the project overview, the project will study the feasibility of insourcing contract transit operations, what it'll take, what it will cost, and what are the hurdles that you'll face in converting these services. It'll also identify the impacts across both MTS departments and functions, as well as outcomes for the region, riders, and employees. So this is kind of comprehensive effort here to do a deep dive. The goal here is that when this comes back to the board, there'll be no surprises. You'll know exactly what you're looking at. You can make an informed decision about how to move forward. The project calls for 4 scenarios. One is to insource everything, basically run it all yourselves in-house. The second option is to insource the fixed route part, both your current big bus service, but also the fixed route minibus service. The third is to insource just the paratransit operations only. And the fourth is to do nothing. Things stay the way they stay how they are now, and there will be impacts to that. So part of what we have to do is give you all of these options and what are the impacts of each. In terms of the focus areas, this isn't just looking at bus operations. It does include operations and scheduling, paratransit operations and dispatching, looking at fleet facilities, how they're maintained and managed, training, the labor aspects, human resources, collective bargaining, third-party contracts. What are the impact of moving those around? How's everything going to be managed, insourced or not insourced? The legal aspects, the technology aspects, finance and accounting, capital assets. We heard a lot about that this morning. There are always impacts as you move projects around. And then lastly, just the coordinated public relations and communications. Are there going to be any impacts with that as we move forward? What I'd like to do now is turn this over to James Gherkin, who will take us through the work plan and schedule.
Great, thank you, Russ. I see indicated we'd like to share a bit about the detailed work plan that we'll undertake for this project, as well as the schedule and next steps moving from here. So the first phase of the project we're undertaking now is an extensive existing conditions analysis. This is slated to take place over the remainder of this year and entails a detailed document review and data analysis. I hope Mr. Daney's not cursing us under our breath, the amount of information we've requested, but it's important, as Russ indicated, with the focus areas of the project that we're thorough and detailed in our review. And that review and analysis will be supplemented by interviews with MTS and contractor staff. And we'll be developing a summary report for both the in-house and contracted operations to give us a baseline understanding of today's operations on both sides. From there, we'll proceed with developing an operational and administrative concept plan. And this will be developed for all 4 of the scenarios Russ indicated, insourcing everything, just fixed route minibus, just ADA paratransit, or do nothing. And we'll be identifying any challenges, opportunities, advantages associated with each of these distinct scenarios and summarizing the impacts across organizational areas or functions to help guide decision-making in the future. From there, for each of the 4 scenarios developed in the second phase, we'll be identifying implementation strategies for MTS to consider, looking at all the opportunities and challenges associated with each of these scenarios with a detailed implementation plan. And then lastly, considering the cost implications across a 10-year horizon for each of the scenarios, outlining changes to positions, functions, policies, standard operating procedures, and of course, any financial risks. And the costing effort will reflect implementation timing and phasing relative to any contract expirations. So to bring that all together, just to give a sense of the schedule for this project, those check marks at the top here indicating where we plan to update the board, undertaking the existing conditions analysis now through the end of the year as indicated, and then in the first part of next year, developing the operational concept plan, then looking toward the implementation strategies and impacts and costing through the latter part of next year to conclude in early 2026. The project team will be seeking board input throughout the project and will be providing regular updates to the board on progress and findings. Following today's meeting, we intend to return in January to provide a briefing on the existing conditions findings from the first phase, coming back in April to brief you on the operational concept plan, an update on the cost and implications and strategy next September, a year from now, and a briefing on the final plan in January of 26. So where do we go from here? Next steps are for the project team to develop the existing conditions report. As I mentioned, we'll be conducting interviews and listening sessions with both MTS and contractor employees, represented and non-represented, and conducting that document review and data analysis across those focus areas Russ indicated. And we'll be developing that existing conditions report and presenting you a briefing in January of 2025. That concludes our update, and we welcome any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
All right, thank you. We will begin our board discussion on this item with Director Elo Rivera.
No public comment? Okay. All right, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate this item being brought to us. I believe Councilmember Moreno raised the issue. It's certainly something that I'm very supportive of. And I think to that point, I do want to make sure that we are embarking on this with a shared sense of where we're trying to get. I'll be honest, the idea of studying feasibility of making the employees who work for a public agency public employees I don't think I need to be shown that that is feasible. We have employees. These folks at one point in time did work under the agency, and it was a decision to outsource. I believe that public agencies should be overwhelmingly, if not exclusively, staffed by public employees. I believe that those employees should earn enough to live in the communities where they're providing the services that they're providing. And I would like to ensure that we are embarking on this with a shared sense of where the board is trying to get. And I want to make my goal explicit, which is to in-house this work. I know that there isn't an action in front of us to make that determination. But what I don't want is this to go on for a year and a half and then to still be spinning on whether or not this is whether or not this is something that we're even considering doing. I understand that there needs to be careful thought and consideration of how to do it, but I also want to make sure that the board has every opportunity to provide clear direction as to, what direction we're trying to, of where we're trying to go. And I fully respect if there are members of the board who need more information as to whether or not this is something we should or should not do. But I also have heard multiple board members at this point in time be fairly clear about our interest in bringing this work in-house. So anyways, I wanted to make that part clear, and I wanted to get some sense of clarity through this discussion and this from staff about the goal of all of this work. And I know that it was laid out in the slides, but there's still seeming to be a little bit of ambiguity and not necessarily complete consistency with the conversations that I'd heard here at the board level, which led to this item being brought to us. So I'll stop there. Appreciate the time, Chair. But again, I just want to make my position clear. I think I want this work brought in-house. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ela Rivera. Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. One of the questions is going to be, what are you comparing to? What baseline will you be using? There are more than a couple of baselines that you can use. One is you want to see what it's going to cost compared to the existing configuration today, meaning the exact same bus routes, the exact same frequency, the exact same situation as we have today. Another possibility could be you want to create a cost scenario for what our aspirational program could be, which would be what we have today plus something. What will you be comparing against?
Well, great question, first off. And I think one of the things that is a huge advantage to MTS is we do run a significant portion of our service in-house. So when you're talking about starting from scratch, and some agencies have gone through that process, we don't have any internal knowledge in that scenario to rely on. But when we talk about the per hour cost of a vehicle, the per hour cost of the labor aspect, the maintenance associated, all of that data we have, that's something that they can easily compare it to. So when they're in this process, not just analyzing the current contracted model, and yes, I'm sure they have data to compare it to other agencies, but they can also bounce it off of what is MTS like, and they can see that data and help us put that information on the table to make those decisions. But some of the other things aren't necessarily quantifiable from a fiscal standpoint that we want them to look at. You know, what is the impact on turnover contracted versus in-house? Is there an advantage? And I think there will be. I mean, I don't want to make any assumptions, but it's past the financial aspect of it. What is the KPI performance of contracted versus in-house? So we're going to have some really good comparison that we'll know that is run in our region for all of you to make a decision based on what are those true impacts beyond fiscal. I think everyone focuses in on that. But I think you're going to see some really good information to help you make that decision, to give direction to the staff. But to answer your question, a lot of the comparison will be what we already do. We know how we do it. We know how many staff members we need from the finance department, from the HR department. We know what our per mechanic, per administrative staff number is to provide the service at the level that we're comfortable with. We'll be comparing that to what the contractors do, and that'll be part of the analysis. So hopefully that helps your question.
And I think that's a good way to look at it. Thank you, because it would be unfair to the board to say, we've come back and we think it's going to cost this, but it's for really what you want instead of what you have. And it would be biased if we said, well, it's going to cost this much more than what is happening today because you want this much more. So I think that you're saying compared to what we're doing today is a great way to look at it, at least as a start. I realize there are ancillary factors such as, well, we need to add another HR person, we need to add her this, or it's going to affect this and this, the things other than the routes and the frequency. I understand. So thank you for clarification.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Director Donovan.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, do you have an estimate of how much this study is going to cost MTS?
You actually approved it in July. I want to say it was right around $500,000. Yeah, $500,000. to complete this
Okay.
roughly. I can get you the exact number. I'm
Does that
sorry, I
include
should have
all,
that.
not just the contractor, but all the MTS time and all that? Or is that just the contract with TMD or?
That is just the approved budgetary amount for the contractor as in
Okay.
TMD. Yeah, there is some cost, obviously, the data collection part of it.
Yeah.
The interview process, yeah, there would be, but that is pretty much so covered in our job responsibilities.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Donovan. Director Moreno.
Thank you for the presentation. And thank you for listening to the board. If I go back in my memory, go back down memory lane, this really was prompted by the strike, right? And us not having services and really hurting the agency, not only optically, but also hurting the agency in regards to funding by a strike that took about a month, and by, right, it was about a month, and members sharing with us that they're being, employees sharing with us that they're being treated differently from MTS workers. And this was a request that we made to see what's happening, how can we bring this in-house, what is it going to cost us, comparing to other agencies. And I think we're on a fact-finding mission right now. And so I'm very curious to see what this study presents. We own the facilities, right? We own, go ahead, Mike, I'm sorry.
Correct.
We own the buses.
Correct.
Okay. And so we really are talking about employees, right, at this moment.
Yeah. Primarily, there are some auxiliary equipment that we don't own that is part of the agreement with the operator, but the mass majority, we own the facilities, the vehicles. Correct.
Okay. And are you guys going to be looking at any litigation and how much that has cost MTS? I don't know if that's the scope of your work.
The potential litigation for insourcing this?
No. Previous litigation that we might not have, it might be before our time that we've had to settle.
Well-
Do you mean like the liability cases that?
Litigation from that
From,
we've
like,
had to
bus
pay out,
accidents?
that we, for instance, our third party, go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead.
No, our third party providers,
Yeah.
have we ever had to pay out litigation in order for issues? And that's just something
To my knowledge, in the 14 years I've been here, we haven't paid on a TransDev or First Transit claim.
Yeah.
But obviously, one of the costs that would come in-house if we operated in-house is that then, to the extent that there are accidents or claims against what's currently contracted out, then that would go into our program as well.
That is a perfect answer.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we
Okay.
don't, we are indemnified through the contract. We don't pay for any, whether it be nuisance or significant issues like we would on our in-house operations. But yes, that would be considered. And
Please.
one consideration financially would be what the impact to our risk liability insurance would be.
Thank you. And just to clarify, when I did ask for this to be brought forward, it was the intention of seeing those workers come in-house. And so I just wanted to make that intention very clear. And so when is the study? When are we going to be presented with the study?
So the proposal right now is we should be, all of the options, all the details by January of 2026, I think is the scheduled date. You're going to have multiple check-ins,
Okay.
4 specific check-ins before that to give you the status and the things that they've upturned or identified at that point. But it is a pretty detailed process to
Yeah.
analyze it. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for this information. And this is probably not the right time, but I'm going to say it just so that I don't forget it. I think maybe the audit committee should look at how different agencies in the state of California run their bus services and their trolley services. So something I'll throw out just so we are comparing, as was stated, apples to apples. So with that, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Director Moreno. Any further discussion on this item? I will thank you, number one, for embarking on this project. Philosophically, I certainly would agree with some of my colleagues who have expressed that public agencies should have public employees. I'm glad to see that there's a component of interviewing MTS employees. And I hope that we're able to continue to engage with MTS employees and employee groups where it makes sense throughout the process, because I don't want to make assumptions for them as we go along in this. And as we identify what it would take to make this happen, and what the implications for the employees themselves would be, I want to make sure that those employees and their representatives have an opportunity to share their perspective on it, because I don't want to be in a position of telling people what's good for them. So I hope that as it makes sense and as we go along, we'll be able to incorporate the feedback from our employees and employee groups. Okay, I think that wraps up our discussion on this item. Let's move on to item number 27, and that is a non-fair operating revenue report. And we're going to invite Mark Olson to provide that presentation. As you get settled in, feel free to begin your report when you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Chair and members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity. Mark Olson, Director of Marketing and Communications here at MTS. And this presentation is about non-fair revenue sources that the agency has. A little bit of background here. Non-fair revenue became a great source of growth for the agency back during the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009. And we kind of find ourselves in a similar position that we were back then, where we're having some significant budget challenges. At that time, same type of thing. There was some reduced service funding from the state. MTS was forced to reduce service, increase fares to help close a $14.4 million budget cap at the time. But it really encouraged the agency to look at different ways that we could find those stable sources of revenue that aren't necessarily dependent on fare and collecting fares. Some of the things that we looked at: property activations, naming rights agreements, increasing our advertising portfolio. And it was successful. Non-fair revenue grew over about a 12-year period from $5 million to $32 million. Here's a look at the portfolio of non-fair revenue and its growth over time. So you can see this is in 4 different buckets. So we have advertising, which is pretty much very clear. We do that on our vehicles, at our stations, on our shelters and benches. There's also energy credits, which is our clean fuel use with CNG and with zero emissions buses. Land management, which includes some billboards, transit-oriented developments. And then there's this one big bucket called other. And the main thing that is interest that's collected on cash in the bank. And so that's been growing over time, and it's grown significantly recently because we did receive some pandemic funding relief. And so we've been able to collect some interest on that. So the growth focus that we think really it's some advantageous for the agency right now is some of the things that we've done on the advertising. And we're going to look at that more specifically in the growth here. That's through naming rights agreements, vehicle advertising, shelter and bench advertising, the digital information board, some billboards, and property activations and land management. So with naming rights agreements, just what we've done recently, the big one that we have on contract right now is with UC San Diego Health, and that's for the entire Blue Line. That's a 30-year contract that began in 2015. And that's for $36 million. We also reached an agreement a few years back with Sequan for the Green Line naming rights. That was a 10-year contract, but it was reduced to 5 years and no longer is on the books for us. but payments totaled over that time of $4 million. The board approved a couple months ago the Alvarado Station naming rights. That was purchased by UC San Diego Health. That's for 20 years and smaller amount, 1.3 million. But in total, in the naming rights category, we're going to receive a little over $1 million in FY25. With vehicle advertising, this is an agreement contract we have with a company called Clear Channel Outdoor. That's in place through 2028. And you'll see this similar structure with a lot of our agreements where we have a minimum annual guarantee. So it's money that we can depend on month after month, year after year. And so that minimum annual guarantee for our vehicle advertising is $980,000. So no matter what, we can count on that money through 2028. On top of that, MTS receives 66% of all the gross advertising revenue that's collected. So once we hit that MAG, the minimum annual guarantee, anything above and beyond that, MTS gets 66% of that revenue. One of the good things was we did really well during Comic-Con. We had 36 trolleys wrapped for Comic-Con, and that totaled about 440,000. So that was really good. That got us about halfway to the MAG in itself. So that was nice to see. With bus shelter advertising, this is also with Clear Channel Outdoor through 2028. Similar, it's 950,000 for the minimum annual guarantee. And then on top of that, we get 55% of any gross advertising revenue there. One of the good things that we worked with Clear Channel on a few years back was adding some digital ads at the various shelters. And so that was at 60 different locations and 90 faces. And there's an additional minimum annual guarantee of 900,000 for that. So we're looking at about 1.8 million in minimum annual guarantees for our shelter program, which is very good. We have 500 shelters in the system. Most of those are within the city of San Diego. With bus bench advertising, this is an agreement with a company called Bryce House. That's through April 2025. So that one actually expires pretty soon. The minimum annual guarantee there is 300,000. And then on top of that, we get 34% of any gross revenue received. We have 1,500 benches in our system. Again, most of that inventory is within the city of San Diego. One of the new advertising sources that we have is with Big Outdoor, and that's for the Gaslamp Corridor Digital Information Board. That one went online in April 1st, 2024, earlier this year, right in time for Padres season. The MAG there is 650,000 a year, and we received 66% on top of that for any additional revenue received. We did really well for Comic-Con. We had NBC Peacock activate the whole Gaslamp Corridor station, as well as the Gaslamp Digital Board, and they paid us 900,000 for that. So that's really good. In total, the projections look like for a year run of this digital board, it will be about $2.2 million. So we're exceeding the projections of what we were going to see in revenue for the digital board. So it's been a very successful start for the first year. Some property activations. These are on primarily our trolley properties at our stations and adjacent properties. So this is the master concessionaire. This is also with Bryce House. The board approved a contract about a year ago with Bryce House, and that runs through 2034. And so these are for a wide variety of things that happen on our properties. Amenities for our customers that we can gain some revenue on, like vending service, and also having concession building rentals where they can sell coffees and snacks for our riders. So we get some rents from that as well. There's also some large format advertising on our system. We have some pretty big spaces at like San Diego State University that are adjacent to some common areas where they get a lot of foot traffic and eyeballs looking at it. So we have some opportunities there at our trolley stations, and that we've built that up. But that annual revenue, that's a revenue generating contract with Bryce House, and so they pay us $1.3 million a year. We also have a small portfolio of billboards along some major arteries and freeways. So we have 13 billboards on our properties. Our team renegotiated some contracts for those billboards and the rents that companies are being charged. And so that resulted in a base increase from $177,000 annually to almost $500,000. So that's really good to see that we were able to renegotiate those to get fair market value there. So that just happened, and that was able to increase our advertising portfolio for non-fair revenue. Now I'm going to go into some new growth opportunities, and we've really been looking at this, over the last, 6 to 9 months and seeing where we could grow these different parts of the portfolio. And really we see the immediate growth over the next 3 to 5 years in the advertising sector of this. And so some of the things that we are looking at pursuing are building some downtown digital information kiosks. And I'll go into all of these a little bit more detail. Looking at installing some large format digital billboards on our properties that are along major freeways. Expanding our bus shelter and bench network, which we're going to do, which is a good thing for our passengers, but also generates some additional advertising revenue. More vehicle advertising and doing that in a couple different ways. And then reaching a couple more naming rights agreements, maybe 2 to 3 over the next 5 years is really our goal. And, being able to capture some revenue that way. So going into expanding the downtown digital board network. So we have the gas lamp digital board, which is a great, anchor right there, right? Sometimes the way this advertising works, you can sell it as a portfolio with advertisers where you would have 4 or 5 different locations, and then you sell that as an entire network to advertisers. And so the goal here is to provide some really cool wayfinding locations at some key stations in the downtown core, as well as generating some revenue through advertising and having them as digital faces as well. As you can see here, we're looking at 4 different locations to place these. And this is the convention center station. So you'd get a lot of eyeballs along Harbor Drive and people using the convention. Little Italy and County Center is another station that we're looking at. America Plaza, which is right at the Broadway-Kettner intersection. And then 12th and Imperial, which is the busiest transit center that we have in the system, as well as adjacent to Petco Park, so you can get a lot of impressions that way. Overall projected revenue here increasing, about $250,000 to $500,000. A couple of large format digital billboards that we've been exploring. One, we have a property that houses our minibuses and paratransit fleet. It's the Copley Park Division, which sits right next to 52 freeway. Along that 52 freeway, there really isn't any other competing billboards. So we think this is a really attractive location to site a billboard. We've been working with Clear Channel Outdoor a little bit on this and exploring it, and they think that there's a path forward with doing a 1-to-1 swap within the regulations for the state with a location that's already existing somewhere else and bringing that location right down to where the Copley Park Division is along the 52 freeway. So we are going to explore that a little bit further. These are just kind of hypotheticals. What we need to do, we wanted to talk to the board a little bit about this first, make sure you were aware of what our plans were. And then at that point, we can approach Caltrans, have some deeper conversations about how this would work and what the path forward is in developing a strategy from there. Another location we've identified is along the Mid-Coast Corridor. And there's a lot of retaining walls, right? And there's not much going on the retaining walls. And so one of the things that we could do, because they face the I-5, is possibly put a billboard there and activating the retaining wall. So again, both of these could generate us between $700,000 and $1 million each. And again, we're going to explore this with Caltrans a little bit further, do our homework and see which one can actually work. Hopefully both. We think certainly the Copley Park Division on the surface seems more feasible than this one along the I-5. So I think if we can get one of these out of 2, I think we'll be in a really good position to reach our goals of expanding our advertising revenue here. Also with naming rights, we partner with Superlative, who helps us secure sponsorships on our system. And Superlative has done an asset valuation of all of our different lines and stations. So here's just a laundry list of some of our lines that we have and a couple of key stations and how much they could generate us per year, they believe. And so I think if we're able to get, 2 to 3 of these locked in, I think that would be great for us and really a good way to build our advertising revenue here. In addition to that, Superlative has had some really good conversations with Rady's Children's Hospital and Mission Federal Credit Union as potential sponsors of this. So we're going to continue to pursue those leads and others. Expanding the bus shelter and bench network. So this is something that we're looking at doing in the immediate future as part of our amenities program and building out these assets for our riders, but they're also able to generate us some revenue for advertising on them. So we're looking at building this out over the next 5 years by about 200 new advertising supported shelters, as well as 300 new advertising supporting benches. So we think the estimated revenue on this that we would get is about $100,000 annually for the benches and about $500,000 for the shelters. More vehicle advertising. So one of the things that we've done with our bus fleet is we have wraps. So you can either do a side wrap, you can do a full wrap, or you can do a tail wrap. So there's 3 different options right now. What we're looking at doing is increasing the number of options that we have to companies, small businesses to be able to do these bus kings on the side of our buses with some of our fleet that we don't do it on right now. Currently, the inventory is limited to just these 3 types of the full sides and tails. If we have kings as well, this would be more of a traditional style of bus ads that are seen across the industry. So it's much easier, according to our advertising partner, to sell this type of ad. It's also cheaper to install. So that actually opens it up to a lot more local small businesses that maybe can't afford to do a large, full wrap or a side wrap that costs over $1,000. They could do this for a much more manageable cost here. So we'd like to expand our revenue or advertising portfolio with these bus kings on vehicles. The estimated revenue here is about $100,000 to $200,000 annually increase that we would get above what we're getting now. With the billboard network, we're looking at converting to digital 1 billboard in Chula Vista that's under review right now. But really what that does is it increases the revenue significantly for the rent that we collect. So we're currently getting a minimum annual rent of about $80,000 for the billboard in Chula Vista. This would double it, if not more, to $160,000 to $240,000. So just on this 1 billboard. So I think that could be a future source of added revenue for our advertising books. Some other things that we're looking at some small format type of digital monitors. We're doing a pilot right now for the interior of the trolleys. As you can see here, they're on the bulkheads or they can be on the windows on the sides, but these are information that can support an advertising network, but it also provides great rider information, service alerts, things like that, next arrivals, when the train's going to be at the next station. But we're piloting it on 8 vehicles, so we'll see how that goes. But our goal is to expand this to the entire fleet of 165 plus vehicles that we have with trolleys. We don't know the estimate advertising revenue that we collect, but I think we'll dig into that a little bit more if the pilot's successful and see where we can go with collecting some additional revenue here. Some other opportunities that we're looking to explore, and that could be possibilities. Fiber leasing is one. Another one is market rate transit-oriented developments. We've done a lot of really good work with affordable housing and helping that crisis. It has a lot of benefits, certainly, but if you do market rate TODs, you can collect some rent on that from people who lease our properties to do those market rate TODs. For example, Union Grantville, at the Grantville station, we collect about $700,000 annually for the market rate TOD that's on that property. Another way is we'd like to, and we'll bring this back to the board at a later date, but possibly extend the alcohol advertising pilot that we have to generate some additional revenue. It's been a little slow to get off the ground, but I think it's really starting to pick up. So if we're able to extend that and really see the full potential of that pilot and allowing some alcohol advertising on our system, that could be another way. We're looking at more property activations. What can we do to retrofit our properties and make them more attractive for advertisers? So that's some of the things that we're looking at. And we're looking at ways that we can retrofit kind of that key corridor on the bay side there for the Green Line for larger Comic-Con and convention activations and advertising. Right now, we do certain things like banners along our fencing. But what can we do to grow that and make it more high profile and make it more attractive there along our fence lines and things like that? So we're exploring some opportunities there as well. We also looked at what are our other agencies doing here? One of the things, this is kind of like a quasi think tank, but Advancing Public Transport, this UITP group, they had a conference, and one of the panel discussions on this was about non-fare revenue. And I think it's really a growing conversation, as a lot of other agencies out here are experiencing a lot of the same budget challenges that we are. And so non-fare revenue is certainly growing as a topic of conversation and what's being done out there. For example, Honolulu Transit is coming out here in October, and one of the things they've identified that they want to look at and talk to us about is the gas lamp digital information board and how we got that done, and learn from us about that. So, and we can also ask them and what they're doing with non-fare revenue. So we'll continue to do our homework. But some of the things that we've seen with the peer review are some of the things that we're doing, and some of the, ways that we're generating revenue for non-fare revenue is being done out there. So I think that's good, but we still need to continue to push the envelope and see what else is out there and what we can do. But, these paid advertising assets here, revenue from retail stations that we have, which is property activations, the market rate TODs, naming rights, cell towers, commercial partnerships. So a lot of these things we're already on track with, but we want to grow this certainly some more and see what else is out there that we can do. So we'll continue to work with our partner transit agencies and see what else is being done out there. So next steps, of revenue potential, we think that we can get these things that I talked about right now about in the advertising bucket, 3 to 5 years with the research, permitting, agreements, ramp up, construction. We think it'll take about that much time to really kind of see how much we're able to gain. But we think a low figure here, a floor rather than a ceiling, is in the next 3 to 5 years, grow this portfolio from about 3.3 million to about $5 million in total. I think what we didn't find, unfortunately, is some type of magic solution here that we weren't thinking of to generate 20, 30, $40 million annually in non-fare revenue. So we'll keep looking. That certainly, it's not like something where we just think we hit a brick wall. We're going to keep searching for it. And we think as, the industry continues to look at these different options, we'll continue to get more ideas out there. But we think just with what we know now, in 3 to 5 years, this is what we can pursue, and we think is feasible, is about, $5 million or more. So with that, I appreciate the time, Chair. Thank you very much for this opportunity again, and I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
All right, let's begin our board discussion. This is an informational item, so no motion is necessary, and we'll start things off with Director Gonzalez.
Thank you very much. I really want to be able to play with this new system, microphones and the technology. I appreciate it, and I really appreciate the presentation. I think all of the points and efforts that you highlighted are worthwhile and worth exploring, but we really breezed quickly through the discussion of the market rate transit-oriented developments. And you made a great point that with the affordable housing efforts, as well as the examples that you mentioned, or I believe it was the Grant Hill location that we are currently getting rents from, it shows us that the opportunity is there. And if this agency doesn't identify our highest and best use, it may be identified for us, and we'll be facing pressures for different ways to use properties that are well located. That being said, it could be a presentation on itself, what kind of opportunities are out there, but what are our efforts to identify those opportunities sooner rather than later, and what kind of restrictions do we have on that?
Well, for the market rate TODs, I think I would ask, our manager of real estate, Sean Myatt, to come up here and talk a little bit about what the opportunities are and what's out there.
You have to sit, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, and I would just point out that right now, MTS Board Policy 18 has a preference for affordable housing. And then we also have the Surplus Land Act requirements that if we haven't already put the property out there for affordable housing developers, then we would have to go through that process and first negotiate with them. But that's, part of it is board policy. So if the board wanted to revisit that policy for future TODs, that would be potential future board action.
Great clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Karen, thank you very much. She kind of took all the answers from me, but yeah, that's kind of it, the two big issues there. So if there are any further questions, I can answer. But
now,
that's
how
the best
about,
answer.
I understand that clarifies the restriction portion. Are there any efforts to identify potential, in other words, bringing back to the board, if you'd want to reconsider, these are sites that we're eyeballing that we might have recommendations for in the future?
Yeah, sorry. Once again, I'm Sean Myatt, the manager of real estate assets. I should have identified myself earlier. We do have a number of sites identified historically where transit-oriented development would make a lot of sense. Thank you. Where transit-oriented development would make a lot of sense. That's posted on our website. We can always go back and continue to revisit those sites and look at other sites and continue to look for more opportunities. So there's always the opportunity to continue to go back out and look, reevaluate these properties. So, but we have already those standing sites and those are posted online. And like Karen mentioned, subject to Surplus Land Act, subject to some of the board policy 18 restrictions, so on and so forth. But we can continue to look into that.
And do those restrictions, last question, I promise, is the ones that are, for example, slide 1 and 3 already have small kind of transit riding service facilities, expanding on those, increasing the use of those. Does that fall under the same type of restrictions? Where there's already a commercial tenant in place technically, but it's really a small kiosk, et cetera.
So, the kiosks that we have on our system are through a separate master concessionaire contract. And so we don't consider those part of kind of surplus land because we're not disposing of the property.
Right.
The kiosks are intended for part of our operations. It's a customer facing, service that enhances transit. And so those are not things that have to go through the Surplus Land Act. But if we were going to have a developer come in and build like a new structure, then that likely would, or we would have to analyze that to see, if that's something that we could claim is operational. Unfortunately, the Surplus Land Act revisions that were made carved out transit as one of the uses that does not get to generate revenue as a public, use and, or an agency use. Like they basically decided that while school districts and other agencies might need to use some of their real estate assets to generate revenue to support their services, transit agencies were not allowed to do that. So some of those things we'd have to have a legislative change, and we've pushed for some of them and have been unreceptive at the legislature.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Do I remember from a previous meeting, we have something like 4,900 bus stops in the system?
Yes, that sounds about right. Yeah, bus stops, not necessarily a shelter or a bench, but a pole.
Yes,
blade.
exactly. So I see that pole as an asset because whereas a bus bench faces out towards the street, a bus pole faces oncoming traffic. And especially if there's an opportunity to use that bus pole for signage, especially for a local business, a mom and pop business who might be able to afford a 12 by 18 sign on that bus pole, that would certainly enhance micro businesses as we're looking at these macro businesses in a sense. I think you should consider the pros and cons of that. $100 a month times 4,900 poles is a lot of money. Is that $4.9 million if I did my math right? $200 a month is $8 million. There's some potential that we should consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Director Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the work on this. Very, very appreciative to see that we're continuing to make progress on this front. I don't know that anyone, I think we were hoping that there's a windfall out there, but expecting that there was something meaningful. And I think this definitely shows that there is. One of the additional things that I appreciate about what I am envisioning if this were to come online, I do think there's an added benefit of potentially like raising the profile of MTS as we do some of this advertising, that in some of the places where, especially where the digital billboards would be, there is kind of simultaneous advertising for MTS that's happening there, reminding folks that MTS is in their community, that it's a high profile agency. I think that there's a kind of intangible benefit to that, which I think is a really good thing. Not to mention the idea of being able to enhance services with the additional revenue. And as Councilmember Moreno and several others have mentioned on multiple occasions, there's a multitude of benefits when we invest in more services that brings more riders on board, and bringing more riders on board brings more revenue in. And we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to turn the cycle in that direction rather than in the opposite direction. Love the idea from Councilmember Goebel about, looking at those small dollar opportunities that will add up over when we think about the system as a whole. I think that's the exact sort of thinking that many of us have been looking for in terms of just looking for every dollar out there. Again, it adds up. And if we're investing that back into the system in a way that serves our riders well, the revenue isn't just the dollar that we bring in, but it's also the dollars that flow from more folks riding because we're providing better services. So thank you again for the work on this. Sharon, appreciate your leadership on this as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Hilo Rivera. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Olson, and thank you for all of your continued work on this. Appreciate it. All right, let's move on to item 28, and that is our transit amenities study. I believe Beverly Neff is going to provide this presentation, so please, once you get settled in and ready to begin, feel free to start your presentation.
Good morning, board. My name is Beverly Neff, and I'll be going over the transit amenities study this morning. In July of this year, we brought the monitoring report for the distribution of transit amenities policy, and it was approved. It's a policy that needs to be federally, it's federally required to be approved every 3 years. So that was brought to your attention last July, and during that board meeting, it was discussed that the board wanted to see a more aspirational plan, and we were asked to provide a study in an effort to receive a more aspirational plan for our transit amenities. As a result, we do plan to engage with a consultant to complete this transit amenity study and develop a transit amenities plan. This plan would complete a review of all of our bus stops, and as Board Member Goebel mentioned, we do have nearly 5,000 bus stops in our system. This plan would do a review of all of these would study all of these current stops, what amenities are currently out there, and would also document the existing conditions. And that's to document whether or not they're already ADA compliant and what the feasibility is to install passenger amenities at those locations. And this study would also document the associated costs needed for those amenities. We are estimating that this budget would cost approximately $500,000, and we do anticipate completing this study next year. We are currently pursuing grant opportunities for this study, but there is a chance that it will impact our mid-year FY25 and FY26 operating budgets. We would be providing periodic reports to the executive committee during the process of the study. And today, all we are seeking is feedback on the framework for the scope of work. So I will go over what our current amenities, that we have today. At our trolley stations, they're pretty standardized. Most of our trolley stations are fairly, they're all fairly the same, but our bus stops vary a lot, particularly between jurisdictions. Some cities, such as Coronado and Poway, have decided to install their own furniture at bus stops, whereas most other cities in San Diego, as well as the County of San Diego, have opted into MOUs with MTS. The City of El Cajon is actually considering opting in. That's going to their city council later this month. So we might start seeing some of the newer MTS furniture out in El Cajon. Right now they have their standard green furniture at those bus stops. Like previously mentioned, the trolley stations are fairly standardized. Most of our trolley stations look the same. They all have shelters and benches, trash receptacles, ticket vending machines, pronto validators. Some stations also have elevators and restrooms, and then SDSU is the only station right now that has an escalator. The first 4 photos that you see on your screen are our standard furniture that we have at bus stops. These are the shelters and benches that you'll see at most of our local bus stops. And as Mark previously mentioned in the previous presentation, these are installed and maintained by a contractor, and they're funded by the ad revenue contract. As you can see in the bottom middle picture, some of these bus stops have to have some sort of capital improvements before we can install the furniture. Not all bus stops have the infrastructure needed for us to install a shelter or a bench. So in that example, you can see that a small, sorry about that. You can see that a small retaining wall and a small sidewalk extension was necessary in order to install the benches. The last 3 photos on the right are our rapid stations. Those stations were built by Sandag, and as you can see, they all look drastically different. Those 3 rapid projects were designed by different designers at different points of time. And it's become a little bit of a maintenance issue. So going forward, we've actually asked Sandag to make them look a little bit more standard. So we hope to see that these become a little bit more consistent looking in the future. These are maintained by MTS, but the funding is still through Sandag via Transnet funding. Beyond the MTS and Sandag provided furniture, there's also a ton of different types of furniture at these bus stops. MTS is not always a party to these. These are often installed by the cities themselves or third parties. The bottom middle, you can see those purple shelters were installed by the City Heights Business Associations. And a lot of times these third parties work directly with the cities and go through an encroachment permit to install this furniture, and MTS is not a party to that. So we don't have a full inventory of all of these different types of furniture, nor do we install or maintain this furniture. While we would love to have passenger amenities at every single bus stop, that's not always possible due to various challenges that we see out in the field. A lot of these bus stops have little to no infrastructure. We can't install a shelter if there's no sidewalk available to bolt that shelter down. In addition to lack of sidewalk, a lot of times we have narrow right-of-way or utility conflicts. So even if sidewalk was expanded, there wouldn't really be a good, easy way to install furniture at a lot of these bus stops. And then in the center, you'll see that unfortunately, a lot of times when we are able to install passenger amenities, they're prone to vandalism or loitering. And unfortunately, a lot of times when we do provide this furniture that's intended for our passengers, they don't actually get to use it because at some of these locations, we do have issues with loitering. The main purpose of today is to talk about the framework of the transit amenity study. Right now, we have 6 tasks that we have laid out as part of the scope. Task 1 would be just general project management. Task 2 would be public outreach, and we want this to be at the forefront because we want to make sure that we have a good public engagement plan and that we are engaging with the public throughout the process of the study. Task 3 would be the current inventory. Because we have so many bus stops and we don't directly manage a lot of the furniture, we do want to make sure that we have a good current inventory of what we have out there, as well as the existing conditions and what would be needed, again, to make it either ADA compliant or just to document the feasibility of installing amenities and the associated costs. Task 4 would be to research industry trends in amenities. We want our consultant to reach out to different transit agencies and find out what they are doing, what kinds of solutions that they've seen, what's been successful, what are the lessons learned. And then task 5 would be for the consultant to provide recommendations in terms of what amenities should be out there and the associated costs for those amenities. And task 6 would be the final deliverable of a comprehensive transit amenities plan. We did take this item to the executive committee last week, and we did receive some preliminary feedback. On your screen are a couple of those points mentioned by various board members. We did hear that public outreach, partnership, communication with jurisdictions, and equity were all key to making this a successful study. We also heard that we want restrooms, shade, and public art to be considered as public amenities. And then we were also brought new ideas as like to consider prefab options, quick build options. So those would all be included as part of this plan as well. And last but not least, we were also asked to make sure that the operation and maintenance costs were considered as part of the plan. So we'll be sure that those costs are also incorporated into the final transit amenities plan. And with that, that concludes my presentation. So I'd be happy to take any questions or additional comments.
Very good. Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Okay. We will now open board discussion on this item. This is an informational item, so we don't need a motion on this item. Is there any board discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, please feel free to provide feedback to Ms. Neff if anything else comes to mind, and we will look forward to the results of that study. Item number 29 is for Chair, Board Member, and CEO communications. Let me kick it off with some information about a couple of upcoming events. The grand opening of the Copper Line is coming up. That's going to be on Sunday, September 29th. That's the new line, as you know, between the El Cajon Transit Center and the Santee Town Center. It'll be operating from 5 in the morning until 11 o'clock in the evening daily, and it's going to take passengers back and forth between our stations in El Cajon and Santee. It'll make trolley operations a lot smoother along that segment and throughout the entire trolley network. We're going to be having a media event on Friday, September 27th to celebrate the start of service on the Copper Line. I know that Vice Chair Goebel and Director Hall will be there to celebrate and help to kick things off. All board members are invited to attend, and staff is going to be sending out an email shortly with all the details, so you can see about getting that into your calendars if you're interested. The second event that I want to highlight is Free Ride Day. Hard to believe it's been almost a year since the last Free Ride Day, but here we are again. MTS and NCTD are going to be again partnering for a Free Ride Day promotion that coincides with California Clean Air Day. And again, this year it'll be on Wednesday, October 2nd. Last year, we saw a nice uptick in ridership for Free Ride Day. A lot of people left their cars at home and took transit. We're expecting more than 250,000 people to ride transit in our region again on October 2nd. We'd like to see even more take advantage of Free Ride Day this year than even did last year. So one thing to be good is if our cities were able to help promote Free Ride Day. Staff is going to email all the board members with a communications toolkit that you could take a look at. And if you deem appropriate, share it with your city staff, and that will help us get the word out and help increase the number of people taking advantage of the opportunity to take transit or try transit without cost on that day. Do we have any other communications?
If I could just, I'd like to make a shout out to all the people who made it possible to get to today's board meeting with the new audio visual in the room. We have all our clerks over here. Noah, who is our project manager, he's normally doing construction for us, but this was his foray into audio visual. And of course, the help desk, Abram, Marcial as well. You all did a great job of getting us here. I don't see JoJo in the room. She's the, I guess you would consider the project sponsor, given that she runs our help desk. So I appreciate all of their efforts, and thank you for being patient with us and learning the system.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for creating this system. I think it's gone pretty well today. Some little minor operator error here and there, but by and large, it's been pretty smooth. Director Dillard. There's an operator error right there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to recognize Sharon and also Mark Olson for coming out and portraying our brand new murals at the La Mesa Grossmont trolley. It was a lot of fun, and I got a chance to meet that amazing artist. And I think that it's a great contribution to our community. We had people that commented on it. It's a way for people to arrive in an area where it just was cement walls. And I think that the mural program that we have going on, I think Chula Vista is next on the list. And I'm excited for our cities to have these murals. And I think that it makes people feel included and comfortable when they're waiting on the platform for our trolley. And I just wanted to appreciate all the team. Make sure I said that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Dillard. Any other communications? If not, then before we move into closed session, let's see if we have any public comment on the closed session agenda, Clerk.
We do not.
Okay, with that, we're going to move into closed session. The next Board of Directors meeting is scheduled for October 17th at 9 o'clock in the morning. Thank you very much, everybody. And at this time, we will move into closed session.
Reporting out of closed session, agenda item number 32, closed session conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D1 in the case of Lourdes Maria Guerra versus MTS. The board received a report and gave instructions to legal counsel.
This meeting is now adjourned.